algebra fans. This is the last video for chapter 9. It's not a lesson, it's just a review of everything we've learned. Alright, so there's not going to be a skills practice with this, but I want to talk about the different ways we've learned for solving quadratic functions and why they're useful, because each of them is sometimes better than the others for different reasons. I want to warn you now, because I am at home, you might be hearing my dog click-clack around, and my youngest is deciding to throw a fit right now. So if you hear some screaming in the background, that's just my life as mom at home at the moment. So the first method, well, maybe not the first, but one of the methods that we learned about was graphing. We learned that we could graph our quadratic equation. We know that the y-intercept is the point 0c, and we could mirror that point after we found our axis of symmetry. And the vertex, we know the x-coordinate lies on the axis of symmetry. Once we find it, for example, it could be x equals 1. We have to plug that back into our equation to find the point. So we know that we could graph to find a solution. Now, the advantage to this is that we can easily see the number of solutions. That's pretty great. We can easily see if it has 2 solutions, 1 solution, or no solutions. The downside to graphing is that it may not give an exact solution without using a table. So you might graph it and find all of these things, and then, for example, in the one I have here, our y-intercept and our vertex miss the x-axis, right? So we would have to start plugging in x's that are less than 0, and we would have to plug in x's that are greater than whatever our axis of symmetry is. So it's not perfect. It's not perfect. For the next one, we're going to talk about using square roots. That was lesson 9.3. This one is great to, we can use it to solve equations of the form x squared equals d, right? So we have x squared, we can get it by itself on one side, and then it's equal to some number. The downside is that this one can only be used for certain equations. We cannot use it for any quadratic that has ax squared plus bx, right? If it's got a bx in there, we can't use it. So again, not perfect. Factoring is the next one. Factoring is really straightforward. We've been doing it for a while now. We've spent an entire unit learning how to factor. It's really straightforward when the equation can be easily factored. All right, it's really straightforward. The downside is that some equations are not factorable. So this doesn't work every time. It doesn't work every time. And sometimes it's a little harder to factor some equations, right? If we have an a value that's bigger than 1, for example, it's a little more complicated to factor them. We can factor them, it's just more complicated. We did not do this completing the square. That was a lesson I chose that, for the sake of distance learning, you're just going to have to learn about it when you get to Algebra 2, okay? So go ahead and cross that row out. The next one we're going to talk about is the most recent one we have learned, and that is the quadratic formula. All right, the quadratic formula. So there's 2 reasons, 2 advantages and 2 disadvantages to this one. The nice thing is that this quadratic formula gives an exact solution, or an exact answer, or answers. That's nice. The nice thing, too, is that the quadratic formula can be used for any quadratic equation. It's like a Swiss Army knife. It can solve any quadratic equation, which is pretty great. Now, there's also some disadvantages to this. The first one is that it takes time. It takes a lot of time to calculate. It's one of the longer, harder ones, right? The other disadvantage is that you have to have a calculator, and it's easy to push the wrong buttons and get wrong answer. So as great as the quadratic formula is, and it's definitely my kind of go-to way that I prefer to solve quadratic functions, it does have some disadvantages to it too. On the assessment, you're going to be asked to use all 4 of the ways we have learned: graphing, using square roots, factoring, and quadratic formula. All right, you're going to be asked to do all 4. Down here, I also wanted to just make a note. Don't forget, you have to check your answers. All right, you have to check your answers. So I've done a check for our factoring one here, this one. Remember, in a check, nothing moves. You just plug in your x values and solve. All right, you're plugging in your x values and solve. So I gave you an example down here. I'm going to tell you now, on the assessment for Chapter 9, I'm going to allow you to use this sheet. So this would be well worth your time to copy down. You might want to have more examples than the one I included in each, but you are welcome to do that. This document is available as a Google Doc, so you can type into it yourself if you would like. And I provided my note outline in very nice type so that it's much easier to read than my sloppy handwriting. Please email me if you have questions, but I really hope that this was useful.